A black woman in a blood-stained coat thinks she can walk into this hospital and order people around? Sergeant Laura Hale scoffed, grabbing Dr. Nia Bennett by the shoulder and violently spinning her against the rain-soaked hood of a police cruiser. The steel handcuffs snapped tightly around Nia's wrists. "You people always have a story," Laura said coldly. "Today it's I'm a doctor. Tomorrow it'll be I'm the victim. Save it." Officer Derek Cole ripped the hospital ID badge from Nia's neck, tossed it into a muddy puddle, then kicked open her medical bag. Surgical instruments, brain scans, and an old silver fountain pen scattered across the wet pavement. He laughed loudly. "Look at this. A black woman carrying fancy tools doesn't make you a surgeon. It just makes you a better liar." Nia swallowed her anger. "A patient inside has a ruptured cerebral aneurysm. Every minute matters." Derek smirked and leaned closer. "Then I guess she'll have to find a real surgeon." The hospital intercom suddenly echoed across the entrance. "Dr. Bennett, report immediately to Operating Room 7. Critical emergency." Deputy Chief Richard Vance stepped outside beneath a black umbrella. Laura pointed at Nia. "You know her?" Vance didn't hesitate. "Never seen her before." A terrified nurse burst through the doors. "The patient is crashing. Where is Dr. Bennett?" Nia looked directly into Laura's eyes. "The woman dying inside has been calling your name. Stay with us until the very end of this unforgettable story. Tell us your city, country, and local time. In the comments, we love seeing where you're watching from. And if stories of courage, justice, and unexpected truth inspire you, consider subscribing so you won't miss the next one." 6 hours earlier, Dr. Nia Bennett stood beneath the humming fluorescent lights of the East Belhaven Community Clinic, carefully wrapping a fresh bandage around an elderly warehouse worker's hand. "You'll need stitches removed in 10 days, she said, "and no lifting anything heavy before then." The man gave her a tired smile. "That means no paycheck." Nia paused. She had heard the same answer too many times. The clinic was small, underfunded, and always overcrowded. The paint peeled near the windows. 2 examination rooms shared one functioning blood pressure monitor. Still, every Thursday evening, Nia came after finishing her hospital duties. She never allowed the clinic to charge patients who could not afford care. "You won't lose your paycheck," she said. "I'll write a work restriction that keeps you on light duty." The man's eyes softened. "Doctors don't usually think about that part." Nia smiled faintly. "Good doctors do." Her phone vibrated inside the pocket of her white coat. The screen showed the name Dr. Owen Reed. Owen was a young neurosurgical fellow at Street Catherine Medical Center. He was talented, serious, and still inexperienced enough to sound nervous when something truly frightened him. Nia answered immediately. "Bennett. Dr. Bennett, we have a ruptured aneurysm coming through the emergency department." Her expression changed. "How old?" 62. Female. Found unconscious at a bus station. Initial scan shows a deep posterior circulation aneurysm. Nia stepped away from the patient and entered the narrow supply room. "Send me the angiogram." "I already did." The images appeared on her phone seconds later. Nia enlarged the scan. A swollen blood vessel sat deep near the base of the brain, surrounded by structures controlling breathing, movement, and consciousness. It was in one of the most dangerous locations a surgeon could encounter. Her eyes narrowed. "Has it ruptured completely?" "Not yet, but there's active leakage." "Blood pressure?" "Unstable." "Neurological response?" "Declining." Nia stared at the scan for several long seconds. She had seen this anatomy only twice before. Both cases had required a bypass technique she had spent years developing. "Do not let anyone attempt standard coiling," she said. "The neck is too wide. The vessel wall will tear." Owen lowered his voice. "Dr. Shaw is already on his way." Nia closed her eyes briefly. Dr. Martin Shaw was highly respected, but he disliked being told that a procedure was beyond him. "Prepare Operating Room 7, Nia ordered. "I want 2 units of blood ready, full neuroanesthesia support, and perfusion on standby." "You're coming?" "I'm leaving now." She ended the call and returned to the treatment room. The warehouse worker watched her remove her gloves. "Someone needs you." "Yes." "Go," he said. "I'll be fine." Nia hesitated only long enough to make sure the nurse understood his care instructions. Then she removed her clinic coat, grabbed her leather medical bag, and hurried into the cold night. Rain had begun falling over Belhaven. At the clinic entrance, Nia opened the hospital application on her phone to review the patient's chart. The screen displayed a red message. "Access denied." She tried again. The same warning appeared. That was unusual. Her credentials had worked earlier that afternoon. Nia called the hospital's technical support line, but after several minutes on hold, She disconnected. There was no time. As she crossed the parking lot, another message appeared. It came from Helen Ward, chairwoman of the Street Catherine Board. Board vote confirmed for 8 a.m. Bring everything you have. Nia stopped beneath the rain. The vote concerned a proposed hospital merger promoted by Deputy Chief Richard Vance. Publicly, Vance claimed the deal would modernize Street Catherine. Privately, Nia had discovered that the plan would eliminate the community trauma program, reduce charity care, and redirect millions of dollars into executive contracts. Her medical bag contained an encrypted drive with internal reports, altered mortality records, and financial documents. It was enough to stop the merger. It might also be enough to destroy Vance's career. Nia placed the drive inside a hidden compartment and climbed into her aging blue sedan. She drove toward Street Catherine as the rain intensified. Traffic slowed along Franklin Avenue. Lightning flashed above the buildings. Water collected across the road in shining black sheets. Then, 2 blocks ahead, a delivery van lost control. The van struck the concrete divider, spun sideways, and slammed into a streetlight. Nia braked hard. Cars swerved around the wreck. No one stopped. She checked the time. The patient at Street Catherine was already running out of it. Then she saw the driver's head hanging forward against the steering wheel. Nia pulled over. She grabbed her medical bag and ran through the rain. The driver was conscious but bleeding heavily from a deep cut near his shoulder. Broken glass covered the seat. The door was crushed inward. "Don't move," Nia said. The man looked at her in panic. "I can't feel my hand." "You're losing blood. Look at me and keep breathing." Nia climbed halfway through the shattered passenger window. She pressed gauze firmly against the wound, then used a tourniquet from her bag to slow the bleeding. Blood soaked the sleeves of her dark coat. Sirens sounded in the distance. The driver began shaking. "Am I dying?" "Not tonight." Nia kept pressure on the wound until paramedics arrived. One of them recognized her. "Dr. Bennett?" "He may have arterial damage," she said. "Maintain pressure and transport him to County General. Street Catherine has an active neurosurgical emergency." The paramedic nodded. Nia ran back to her car. She turned the key. Nothing happened. She tried again. The engine clicked once and died. Her phone slipped from her wet hand and struck the pavement. The screen shattered. Nia looked toward the glowing towers of Street Catherine, less than a mile away. Then she tightened her grip on the medical bag and began running through the storm. High above the street, a traffic camera followed her movement. Inside a dark hospital office, Calvin Ross watched the footage on a monitor. He picked up the phone. "She's still coming." On the other end, Richard Vance remained silent for several seconds. Then he spoke. "Make sure she never reaches that operating room." Rain hammered the glass walls of Street Catherine Medical Center as Richard Vance stood alone in the executive operations office overlooking the emergency entrance. He watched the live security feed without blinking. Dr. Nia Bennett was still running, still coming. Calvin Ross, the hospital's director of security, entered quietly and closed the office door. "She stopped to help the crash victim," Ross reported. "She's covered in blood now." A faint smile appeared on Vance's face. "Perfect." Ross hesitated. "We can still let her in and deal with the board tomorrow." Vance slowly turned. "You don't understand what happens if Nia Bennett walks into operating room 7 tonight." He placed a thick folder onto the desk. Inside were copies of internal mortality reports, financial transfers, executive bonus approvals, and unsigned settlement agreements. "She's carrying evidence that destroys everything we've spent 2 years building." Ross swallowed. "So what do you want me to do?" Vance leaned closer. "Delay her." "For how long?" "Long enough." Ross frowned. "The patient could die." Vance's expression never changed. "That's unfortunate." A heavy silence filled the office. Then Vance picked up the hospital phone. "I need security dispatch." Within seconds, a supervisor answered. "This is Deputy Chief Vance." His voice became calm and professional. "We've received information that an unidentified female wearing a blood-covered jacket may attempt unauthorized access through the employee entrance. She may be carrying stolen hospital property and controlled medical supplies." Ross looked up in surprise. "Should we verify that?" "No." Vance ended the call. Seconds later, another call went out from hospital security to Bellhaven Police Dispatch. A possible theft, possible stolen narcotic, possible impersonation of hospital staff. Everything sounded believable. Everything was false. Meanwhile, inside operating room 7, nurses rushed to prepare equipment while alarms echoed through the department. Dr. Owen Reed studied the patient's latest brain scan with growing concern. "This is getting worse," he whispered. Beside him stood Dr. Martin Shaw, one of the hospital's senior neurosurgeons. Shaw crossed his arms. "We're wasting valuable time." Owen looked up. Dr. Bennett specifically said not to attempt conventional coiling. Shaw gave him a dismissive glance. "Dr. Bennett isn't here. She's on her way." "Suwon Wai." He pointed toward the scan. "I've repaired aneurysms for 30 years. Owen carefully chose his words. "This anatomy is different." Shaw's jaw tightened. "You think I need one of my former students telling me how to perform surgery?" "No, sir." "Then prepare my instruments." Owen stared once more at the image. Everything about the vessel worried him. The aneurysm neck was unusually wide. One mistake could rupture the artery completely. He quietly prayed Nia would arrive before Shaw made his decision. In radiology, the unconscious patient lay connected to multiple monitors. Her breathing had become shallow. A nurse gently removed a gold necklace before the emergency transfer. The locket accidentally opened. Inside was an old photograph. A teenage girl in a police academy uniform smiled beside the woman now fighting for her life. Printed beneath the picture were 2 words: Laura, forever proud. The nurse frowned. "Maybe we should document this." Another nurse carefully placed the necklace into a clear evidence bag. At that moment, the patient's fingers twitched. Her lips barely moved. Laura. The word was almost impossible to hear. What did she say? "I think, Laura." Seconds later, she slipped back into unconsciousness. Outside, Nia finally reached the hospital ground. She was breathing hard after running through nearly a mile of pouring rain. Her dark coat was soaked. Blood stained both sleeves from the accident victim she had treated. She hurried toward the employee entrance. The electronic reader flashed red. Access denied. She tried again. Denied. Again. Denied. Before she could react, 2 security officers approached. "Ma'am, step away from the door. I'm Dr. Nia Bennett." She pulled another identification card from her wallet. "My credentials aren't working. I need to reach operating room 7 immediately." One guard examined the card. His radio suddenly crackled. "Possible suspect matches description. Stall until police arrive." The guard immediately handed the badge back. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't verify who you are. You can call Dr. Owen Reed. No authorization. Call administration. No authorization." Nia looked toward the brightly lit operating suites. "Someone is dying." "So you claim." She stepped sideways, intending to enter through the emergency doors. The guards blocked her path. Red and blue lights reflected across the rain. 3 police cruisers stopped near the entrance. Sergeant Laura Hale stepped out first. Her eyes immediately focused on the blood covering Nia's coat. "Hands where I can see them." Nia slowly raised both hands. "My name is Dr. Nia Bennett." Laura ignored the introduction. "What's in the bag?" "Medical instruments." "Open it." Nia knelt and carefully unzipped the leather bag. Inside lay surgical loops, sterile gloves, vascular clips, anatomical sketches, and an encrypted storage drive. Officer Derek Cole picked up the drive. "What's this?" "Confidential hospital records." Laura's expression hardened. "So you're admitting you took hospital property?" "No. They're my authorized files." Derek laughed. "Convenient answer." Nia kept her voice calm despite the pounding rain. "Please call operating room 7. They'll confirm everything." Laura folded her arms. "If you're really a surgeon, why are you arriving on foot covered in someone else's blood?" "I stopped to save a crash victim." "Do you have proof?" "My phone was destroyed." "How convenient." Derek looked toward Laura. "Dispatch warned us about a woman pretending to be hospital staff." Laura nodded slowly. Everything in front of her appeared to fit the report. Blood. Restricted files. Access denied. A locked employee entrance. Nia took one careful step forward. "I don't have time for this." Laura immediately placed a hand on her holster. "Don't move." From somewhere deep inside the hospital, the emergency intercom suddenly echoed through the night. "Code Neuro. Operating room 7. Dr. Bennett, report immediately." Everyone froze. Derek looked toward the building. Laura frowned. Then Calvin Ross walked through the entrance, wearing his security badge and carrying complete confidence. Laura turned to him. "Do you know a Dr. Nia Bennett?" Ross never looked at Nia. He simply shook his head. "No." Nia felt her stomach sink. The trap had just closed. "The intercom just called for Dr. Bennett," Sergeant Laura Hale said, narrowing her eyes. "Explain that." Calvin Ross didn't hesitate. "Someone probably entered the wrong emergency code. This woman isn't employed here." Officer Derek Cole smirked. "I knew it. Nice try." Dr. Nia Bennett looked directly at Ross. "You've worked with me for 4 years. Ross finally met her eyes. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." For the first time that night, Genuine disbelief crossed Nia's face. Not anger. Not fear. Betrayal. Rain streamed down her face as she slowly took one step toward the entrance. You know exactly who I am. Laura immediately stepped in front of her. I said, don't move. I'm the lead vascular neurosurgeon on tonight's emergency case. Then prove it. My credentials were disabled. Convenient. My phone was destroyed helping a crash victim. Another convenient story. Nia took a slow breath. Call Dr. Owen Reed. Laura folded her arms. The hospital's security director has already identified you as an imposter. Before Nia could answer, Derek grabbed the broken hospital badge from her hand. He held it up between two fingers with obvious disgust. A plastic card and a fancy medical bag don't make you a surgeon. With a sharp flick of his wrist, he threw the badge into a rain-filled gutter. The current immediately began carrying it away. Nia instinctively stepped toward it. Laura interpreted the movement as resistance. Hands behind your back. I am not resisting. Hands behind your back. Nia slowly obeyed. Cold steel cuffs clicked around her wrists. Several patients waiting outside the emergency department turned toward the commotion. Family members lifted their phones. Within seconds, cameras were recording. Derek pushed Nia toward the hood of the cruiser. Spread your feet. She remained silent. I said, spread your feet. Nia complied without looking at him. Derek opened her leather medical bag again and dumped everything onto the wet pavement. Surgical loupe, sterile gloves, anatomical sketches, microvascular instruments. Each item splashed into dirty rainwater. Then a small velvet case slid across the asphalt. It opened. Inside rested an old silver fountain pen engraved with tiny words. Tonya. Keep healing people. Love. Mum. Derek picked it up. What is this? My mother's pen. He shrugged. Looks expensive. Without another word, he tossed it carelessly back into the puddle. Nia closed her eyes. That pen had been the last birthday gift her mother ever gave her before dying from an untreated heart condition years earlier. She said nothing. Her silence somehow made the scene even heavier. Inside the hospital, alarms continued screaming. Operating room 7 had become painfully quiet. Dr. Martin Shaw studied the latest scans. They're losing the window. Owen Reed looked toward the hallway for what felt like the 100th time. She should already be here. No, Shaw answered. She isn't. A nurse rushed inside. Doctor, we've paged Dr. Bennett 9 times. Still nothing. Shaw stared at the monitor. If we wait any longer, we'll lose the patient. Owen shook his head. The artery won't tolerate conventional coiling. And if we do nothing? Owen had no answer. Outside, another announcement echoed through the hospital loudspeakers. Attention, Dr. Nia Bennett. Please report immediately to operating room 7. This time the message repeated twice. Patients exchanged confused looks. Several nurses standing near the entrance recognized the name. One whispered quietly, "Isn't Dr. Bennett our cerebrovascular director?" Before anyone could respond, Richard Vance emerged from the hospital carrying a black umbrella. His suit was immaculate. Not a single drop of rain touched him. Laura stepped forward. "Sir, are you Deputy Chief Richard Vance?" "Yes. We've detained a woman claiming she's Dr. Nia Bennett." Vance glanced at Nia for barely a second. His expression never changed. "I'm afraid she's lying." Nia stared at him. "Richard." He cut her off. "I don't know this woman." Those 5 words landed harder than the handcuffs. Laura nodded. "Thank you, sir." Vance turned as if preparing to leave. Nia spoke again. "You know exactly why I'm here." For the briefest moment, Vance paused, only for a heartbeat. Then he continued walking. "You have the wrong person." Across the parking lot, Owen Reed suddenly burst through the emergency doors. He had removed one surgical glove while running. "Dr. Bennett!" Relief flashed across Nia's face. "Owen!" Before he could reach her, 2 security guards intercepted him. "You can't leave the sterile area." "I don't care." He pointed toward Nia. "She's the surgeon!" Vance's voice became cold. "Dr. Reed." Owen turned. "If you abandon your assigned patient again, consider yourself suspended." "The patient needs her." "The patient needs whoever is available. Nobody else can perform this operation." The rain fell even harder. Laura looked from Owen to Vance, then back to the woman standing in handcuffs. For the first time since arriving, uncertainty crept into her expression. At that exact moment, an emergency nurse sprinted out of the hospital, nearly slipping on the wet pavement. She was crying. "Dr. Shaw just called." Everyone turned toward her. "The aneurysm has expanded." She looked directly at the officers. "If Dr. Bennett doesn't get into that operating room immediately," her voice broke, "she may be too late." Nia quietly raised her cuffed hands. "I told you. The parking lot fell completely silent except for the sound of rain. For several endless seconds, no one moved. Rain continued to pound against the pavement while Dr. Nia Bennett stood handcuffed beside the police cruiser, her wrists aching beneath the cold steel. Sergeant Laura Hale looked toward the terrified nurse. Is she telling the truth? Before the nurse could answer, Richard Vance stepped forward with absolute confidence. The operating room is under control. The nurse shook her head. No, sir. It isn't. Vance shot her a warning look. You should return to your station. But Dr. Shaw, I gave you an order. The nurse lowered her eyes and slowly backed away. Laura watched the exchange carefully. Something felt wrong, but years of trusting authority made hesitation feel like disobedience. Inside Operating Room 7, the atmosphere had changed completely. The monitors pulsed with rapid alarms. Dr. Martin Shaw adjusted his surgical mask and stared at the latest angiogram. We've waited long enough. Owen Reed stepped in front of the instrument table. Please don't do this. Shaw looked at him sharply. You have another suggestion? We wait for Dr. Bennett. We don't have that luxury. You know the aneurysm neck is too wide. I know how to perform my job. Owen lowered his voice. She's the only surgeon who successfully repaired this exact anatomy. Shaw's pride flared. So tonight won't be the first. The anesthesiologist interrupted quietly. Blood pressure is dropping. Proceed, Shaw ordered. A nurse handed him the catheter. Outside, Nia suddenly closed her eyes. Almost instinctively, she imagined every step Shaw was about to take. She whispered under her breath, please don't choose the standard approach. Laura overheard her. What are you talking about? Nia looked directly at her. If he advances through the posterior branch, the vessel wall won't hold. Laura frowned. You can't possibly know what they're doing. I trained the entire team. Derek laughed, still pretending. Nia ignored him. He'll think he can stabilize the aneurysm with conventional coiling. Laura remained silent. He can't. How do you know? Because I designed the alternative. The words lingered in the rain. Inside the operating room, Shaw carefully advanced the catheter toward the damaged artery. Everyone watched the monitor. AC. Closer. The vessel appeared stable. For one hopeful second, Owen almost believed Shaw might succeed. Then the image changed. A thin stream of contrast dye escaped through the fragile wall. Owen's heart stopped, the next tearing. Before Shaw could react, the weakened artery ruptured completely. A shrill alarm exploded throughout the operating room. Massive bleed. Pressure's crashing. Suction. More blood. The surgical team rushed into frantic motion. Shaw's confident expression disappeared. Outside, another emergency page echoed across the hospital speakers. Code Neuro. Operating Room 7, immediate assistance. Laura stared toward the building. This time, panic was unmistakable. Richard Vance pulled out his phone and stepped away from the officers. No one noticed him quietly deleting several messages. Except Nia. She watched every movement. He already knew this would happen, she said softly. Laura turned. What? He never expected that patient to survive. Laura's eyes narrowed. Why would anyone want that? Nia didn't answer directly. Because dead patients can't testify. Laura looked confused. What are you talking about? The patient isn't the only reason I came tonight. Nia glanced toward her leather medical bag, still lying open on the wet pavement. The drive inside that bag contains years of internal reports. Derek picked up the encrypted drive again. This thing? Yes. What's on it? Nia met Laura's eyes. Evidence. Richard Vance suddenly returned. Officer, that device contains stolen hospital records. Nia immediately shook her head. No, it belongs to Street Catherine. It belongs to a federal investigation. Silence. Even Derek stopped smiling. Laura slowly looked between them. A federal investigation? Vance answered first. She's lying. Nia spoke just as calmly. If I were lying, why would someone disable my credentials 7 minutes before I arrived? Laura blinked. What? My account worked this afternoon. She looked toward Ross. You told us the system automatically rejected her. Ross shifted uneasily. It probably did. Probably? It happens. Nia continued. Ask your dispatcher for the exact time the hospital called police. Laura immediately reached for her radio. Vance stepped forward. Sergeant, this isn't relevant. It is to me. He forced a smile. The priority is hospital security. The priority, Laura replied quietly, was supposed to be public safety. Before anyone could speak again, Owen Reed burst through the emergency doors a second time. His surgical gown was stained with fresh blood. He was breathing so hard he could barely speak. We lost proximal control. His eyes found Nia immediately. Dr. Bennett, for the first time all night, his voice broke. We can't stop the bleeding. The parking lot became completely silent. Every officer looked at Nia. Every nurse looked at Nia. Even Richard Vance's calm expression flickered. Owen took another desperate step. If she doesn't operate, he struggled to finish the sentence. The patient won't make it. Laura slowly looked down at the steel handcuffs around Nia's wrists, then back toward the operating room. For the first time that night, doubt became fear, and inside the ICU corridor, a frightened nurse rushed toward them carrying a clear evidence bag. Inside was an old gold locket recovered from the unconscious patient. She looked directly at Laura. "Sergeant, I think you need to see whose picture was inside this necklace." The nurse's trembling hands tightened around the clear evidence bag. Inside rested a worn gold locket, its delicate chain stained with dried blood. Sergeant Laura Hale accepted it without understanding why everyone had suddenly become so quiet. "What is this?" "We found it on the patient before surgery," the nurse answered. "It opened while we were preparing her." Laura slowly unfolded the tiny photograph inside. The world around her disappeared. A teenage girl smiled proudly in a police academy uniform, her arm wrapped around the woman now fighting for her life. Written beneath the picture in faded blue ink were 4 words. "My Laura, always courageous." Laura's breathing stopped. "No." Her fingers began to shake. This can't be." The nurse swallowed. When the patient briefly regained consciousness, she whispered only one name. Laura looked up. "Mine?" The nurse nodded. She said Laura before losing consciousness again. Memories slammed into Laura with brutal force. Her mother's laughter in their small kitchen. Driving lessons after high school. Their final argument 8 years earlier, when Laura had accused Evelyn of never understanding the demands of police work. She had walked away. Neither of them had called since. Laura had spent years convincing herself that distance was easier than forgiveness. Now her mother lay inside the hospital, dying, and the only surgeon who might save her was standing in front of her, wearing handcuffs Laura herself had locked into place. Her eyes slowly lifted toward Nia. "You knew?" Nia nodded gently. "I saw the photograph when the nurse ran out. You said she was calling my name." "Because she was." Laura's voice cracked. "My mother, she's the patient?" "I'm afraid she is." For the first time in years, Sergeant Laura Hale no longer looked like a commanding officer. She looked like a frightened daughter. Without another word, she reached toward the handcuffs. The key trembled in her fingers. Before she could unlock them, Richard Vance stepped between them. "Sergeant." His voice was calm. "Don't let emotion interfere with procedure." Laura stared at him. "My mother's inside. I understand." "No, I don't think you do." Vance lowered his voice. "This woman is still under investigation. No charges have been filed. We have probable cause." "For what?" "Unauthorized possession of confidential records." Nia answered before Vance could continue. "They're my records. They belong to the hospital. They belong to the Federal Oversight Committee investigating your hospital." The sentence struck like lightning. Every nearby officer looked at Vance. Ross visibly paled. Laura slowly turned toward Nia. "What federal committee?" Nia took a measured breath. "I wasn't only coming here to operate." She looked directly at Vance. "I was also scheduled to meet Chairwoman Helen Ward before tomorrow's board vote." Vance remained silent. "The encrypted drive," Nia continued, "contains documented evidence that executive administrators deliberately reduced emergency staffing, altered mortality reports, and concealed preventable patient deaths. Derek Cole Scoffit. That's a pretty wild story," Nia calmly answered. "Then ask him." She nodded toward Vance. "Ask him why my hospital credentials were disabled exactly 7 minutes before I reached the employee entrance." Laura's eyes narrowed. She looked toward Calvin Ross. "Is that true?" Ross hesitated. I don't know." "You don't know?" "I'd have to check the system. You already told me the account had been inactive." Ross swallowed. "I assumed." Laura cut him off. "You assumed?" For the first time, Ross couldn't find an answer. Laura immediately lifted her radio. "Dispatch, this is Sergeant Hale. Go ahead. I need confirmation." She spoke without taking her eyes off Ross. "What time did the hospital first request police assistance tonight?" A brief pause followed. Then the dispatcher answered. "Emergency call logged at 9:18 p.m. Laura turned to Nia. "What time did your credentials stop working?" 9:11. Another pause. Laura asked one final question. "Can dispatch identify which extension placed the call?" Static crackled through the speaker. Then, "Caller ID traces to Internal Administrative Office. Extension registered to Deputy Chief Richard Vance." Silence. Even the rain seemed quieter. Laura slowly lowered the radio. She looked directly at Vance. "You made the call. It was standard security protocol." You reported a theft before the supposed suspect even reached the building. I acted on information. What information? Vance's jaw tightened. I don't answer operational questions from police officers. Laura stepped closer. You do tonight. Ross suddenly interrupted. Maybe there's been some misunderstanding. Laura turned sharply. Then explain it. Ross looked toward Vance, silently begging for direction. Vance offered none. Ross finally muttered, I received instructions to report a possible intruder. From whom? Ross said nothing. Laura's patience snapped. Answer me. Ross slowly looked at Vance. The answer was obvious without a single word. Meanwhile, inside operating room 7, the situation became catastrophic. Blood continued filling the surgical field. Dr. Martin Shaw removed his gloves in frustration. I can't visualize the rupture. The anesthesiologist looked at the monitor. Pressure is 60/30. Owen Reed's face had turned pale. We're losing her. Another surgeon whispered, We need Bennett. Shaw closed his eyes. For the first time that night, he admitted the truth. I can't repair this. Outside, Owen burst through the emergency doors once again. He nearly slipped on the wet pavement before catching himself. He ran directly toward Laura. Please. He pointed at Nia. We've exhausted every option. Laura looked at the handcuffs, then at Owen, then at Vance. She made her decision. She slid the key into the cuffs. Click. One bracelet opened. Before she could unlock the second, Richard Vance grabbed her wrist. You release her, he said coldly, and you'll answer for obstructing a criminal investigation. Laura pulled her arm away. What investigation? Vance's composure began to crack. She stole confidential hospital property. Nia answered quietly. If I intended to steal anything, she nodded toward the encrypted drive. Why would I encrypt it under my own federal authorization code? Laura looked confused. Federal authorization? Nia met her eyes. The drive doesn't unlock with my fingerprint. It unlocks only after verification from the Office of Healthcare Integrity. Vance's face lost its color. Nia continued. If I fail to check in before midnight, she glanced at the clock above the emergency entrance. Every document inside that drive is automatically transmitted to federal investigators. Ross stared at her. You already sent a copy? No. I sent all of it. The color drained from Vance's face completely. For the first time since this nightmare began, he looked afraid. Then another black SUV rolled through the hospital gates, followed by a second, then a third. None carried police markings. Each displayed a discreet federal government seal on the windshield. Every eye in the parking lot turned toward the arriving vehicles. Nia didn't smile. She simply looked at Richard Vance and said quietly, I told you the truth always arrives, even when people try to handcuff it. The 3 black SUVs rolled silently across the rain-soaked entrance and stopped one after another beneath the emergency canopy. No flashing lights, no sirens, only quiet authority. Every conversation in the parking lot died instantly. Richard Vance's heartbeat pounded against his ribs. He knew exactly who drove vehicles like those. The first SUV door opened. A middle-aged woman in a dark navy suit stepped out, followed by 2 federal investigators carrying locked evidence cases. Chairwoman Helen Ward. Behind her walked Special Agent Marcus Grant from the Office of Healthcare Integrity. Laura instinctively stepped aside. Marcus scanned the scene. A handcuffed surgeon, scattered surgical instruments, a hospital executive standing suspiciously calm. He didn't need anyone to explain where the problem had begun. His eyes settled on Nia. Dr. Bennett. She gave a small nod. I apologize for the delay. Marcus looked at the half-open handcuff still hanging from one wrist. I can see that. Richard Vance immediately forced a confident smile. Chairwoman Ward, Agent Grant. You've arrived during an unfortunate security incident. Marcus interrupted without looking at him. I wasn't speaking to you. Silence. Laura finally removed the second handcuff. The metal bracelet fell onto the wet pavement with a sharp clang that echoed across the entrance. Nia slowly rubbed the deep red marks around her wrists. She didn't complain. She didn't accuse anyone. Instead, she turned toward Owen Reed. Status. Owen answered immediately. Massive rupture. Blood loss is uncontrolled. Dr. Shaw can't repair it. How long? Maybe 15 minutes before irreversible damage. Nia closed her eyes for a brief second. Then she picked up her soaked surgical bag from the pavement. Most of the instruments were ruined. The silver fountain pen lay half buried in muddy water. Laura quietly bent down, picked it up, wiped away the dirt with her sleeve, and held it out. I'm sorry. Nia accepted it without a word and carefully slipped it back into the velvet case. Marcus Grant finally faced Richard Vance. I have one question. Vance straightened his tie. Of course. Who ordered Dr. Bennett's hospital credentials to be disabled? No one. Marcus handed him a printed document. The server audit disagrees. Vance glanced down. The color drained from his face. The report showed a manual administrative override. User ID, RV104. Time, 9:11 p.m. Authorized by Richard Vance. E. Vance searched desperately for an explanation. It was a cybersecurity precaution. Marcus remained expressionless. Interesting. He opened another folder. Then perhaps you can explain why your office phone placed the emergency call reporting a woman stealing hospital narcotics exactly 7 minutes later. No answer came. Calvin Ross lowered his head. Marcus noticed. Mr. Ross. Ross looked up nervously. You have one opportunity to tell the truth. Richard Vance cut in. Don't say another word. Ross looked at Vance, then at Nia, then toward the operating room where alarms still echoed. His shoulders collapsed. He ordered me to do it. The words barely rose above the rain. Marcus nodded. Everything. Ross inhaled deeply. Deputy Chief Vance told me to disable Dr. Bennett's credentials, report a fake security threat, and keep her outside the hospital long enough for someone else to perform the operation. Laura stared at him in disbelief. You knew a patient could die. Ross's voice shook. He said, once Dr. Bennett was blamed for missing the surgery, the board would remove her. Richard exploded. You're lying! Ross shouted back for the first time. No. His eyes filled with tears. I've lied for you for 2 years. The parking lot fell silent again. Marcus calmly turned another page. We also recovered deleted emails from the hospital server. Helen Ward's expression hardened. They discuss reducing emergency staffing, altering mortality reviews, and delaying disclosure to the board. Vance's confidence completely disappeared. You can't prove intent. Marcus looked directly into his eyes. We don't have to. He held up the encrypted drive Derek had taken from Nia. This contains every document Dr. Bennett preserved. Derek slowly stepped forward and handed the drive to Marcus. I didn't know. Marcus accepted it. I believe you. Then he faced Nia. Doctor, your authorization has been fully restored. Helen Ward added quietly. And effective immediately, every decision made by Richard Vance tonight is suspended. Nia nodded once. She didn't even glance at Vance. She looked only toward the operating room. My patient comes first. Marcus stepped aside. The hallway is clear. Nia started toward the hospital entrance before suddenly stopping beside Laura. Laura couldn't raise her eyes. My mother? Her voice broke. I don't deserve to ask this. Nia looked at the frightened officer for several seconds. Then she answered with complete calm. A surgeon doesn't choose who deserves to live. She gently touched the fading marks left by the handcuffs. But after tonight, I hope you remember what it feels like when someone judges a life before learning the truth. Laura's eyes filled with tears. I will. Without another word, Nia pushed through the emergency doors and disappeared into the brightly lit hallway. As the doors closed behind her, Richard Vance suddenly took one cautious step backward, then another. Marcus Grant noticed immediately. Mr. Vance. Vance froze. I wouldn't run. Marcus calmly reached into his jacket. Because your night, he revealed a federal arrest warrant, is only beginning. The operating room doors burst open as Dr. Nia Bennett strode inside, her soaked coat discarded in the hallway. A nurse hurriedly helped her into fresh surgical scrubs, while another disinfected the deep red marks still circling her wrists. No one spoke. Every member of the surgical team knew they had already crossed the edge of disaster. Dr. Martin Shaw stepped back from the operating table, his gloves stained with blood. I couldn't control the rupture, he admitted quietly. I'm sorry. Nia looked at the monitor for less than 5 seconds. The aneurysm had completely torn open. Blood obscured nearly every landmark she needed. The standard coiling attempt had created exactly the catastrophic failure she had warned about. She did not criticize Shaw. She simply said, tell me everything you've done. As the team reported each step, Nia mentally rebuilt the anatomy. Prepare for Bennett bypass. A stunned silence followed. One scrub nurse blinked. We've never performed it. You've assisted me before. Only once. Tonight will be the second. Across the observation window, Laura Hale stood frozen, watching through tear-filled eyes. Her mother lay only a few feet away. Every machine connected to Evelyn seemed to be fighting against time itself. Laura whispered to Owen, is there really no one else? Owen shook his head. There never was. Inside the operating room, Nia steadied her breathing. Microscope. The massive surgical microscope descended over the operating field. Temporary clips. Placed. Microsuture. Ready? The room fell completely silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Nia's hands moved with astonishing precision despite the bruises left by the handcuffs. Every motion was smooth, every decision immediate. Minutes passed. Then suddenly, pressure falling. The anesthesiologist's voice shattered the silence. 40/25. The heart monitor accelerated into a frantic alarm. One nurse instinctively stepped backward. Nia never looked up. More blood. It won't be enough. It will if we restore flow. She carefully exposed a tiny artery no wider than a strand of spaghetti. One wrong movement would end everything. Outside the operating room, Special Agent Marcus Grant supervised investigators sealing Richard Vance's office. Boxes of financial records, computers, and archived files were carried into evidence vehicles. Richard Vance stood handcuffed beneath the hospital entrance. His expensive suit was soaked by the rain. "You can't arrest me over administrative decisions," he snapped. Marcus calmly unfolded the warrant. "We're not." He looked directly at Vance. "We're arresting you for obstruction of emergency medical care, falsifying official reports, destruction of evidence, conspiracy to interfere with a federal investigation, and suspected healthcare fraud." Helen Ward stepped forward. "The board has unanimously voted to terminate your employment effective immediately." Vance laughed bitterly. "You think Bennett has already won?" "No," Helen answered. "I think the truth already has." Back inside the operating room, another alarm erupted. "No pulse pressure!" For one terrifying second, the blood flow disappeared completely. Every eye turned toward Nia. She remained perfectly calm. Nobody panic. She adjusted the bypass graft by less than a millimeter. Now, nothing happened. Another second passed. Then, a thin stream of bright red blood flowed smoothly through the reconstructed vessel. The monitor responded. "Pressure improving. 60/40, 75/50. The anesthesiologist looked up in disbelief. "We're getting perfusion back!" A wave of relief swept through the room, but Nia wasn't finished. She carefully reinforced the damaged artery, closed the rupture, and inspected every millimeter under high magnification. Only after several long minutes did she finally remove her hands from the field. Final angiogram. The images appeared on the overhead screen. Perfect blood flow. No leakage. No obstruction. Complete restoration. No one spoke. Then Dr. Martin Shaw slowly removed his surgical cap. "I've practiced neurosurgery for 32 years, he said quietly. "I've never seen anyone do that." Nia simply replied, "The patient isn't awake yet." Outside, Laura watched the operating room doors with trembling hands. She no longer cared about her career. She no longer cared about the investigation. She wanted only one thing, for her mother to survive. Nearly an hour later, the operating room doors finally opened. Nia stepped into the hallway, exhausted. There were faint bloodstains on her sleeves. Deep bruises still circled her wrists. Laura rushed toward her but stopped halfway. She was afraid of the answer. Nia removed her surgical mask. "The bleeding has been stopped." Laura couldn't breathe. Is she alive?" Nia nodded. "She's alive." Laura covered her mouth as tears streamed freely down her face. "But," Nia continued gently, "the next 24 hours will determine how much neurological function she recovers." Laura broke down completely. "I'm so sorry." Her voice shook uncontrollably. "I handcuffed the woman who saved my mother's life." Nia looked at her for a long moment. "You handcuffed someone before learning who she was." Laura lowered her head. "There's a difference." Before Nia could answer, Marcus Grant approached with Helen Ward. He held a newly recovered tablet taken from Richard Vance's office. "Our digital team just unlocked this." He turned the screen toward Nia. On it was a draft email scheduled to send at midnight. Subject: Recommendation for immediate termination of Dr. Nia Bennett following failure to respond to emergency surgery. Laura stared at the screen in horror. Richard Vance hadn't simply planned to delay Nia. He had planned to destroy her reputation forever, using the death of his own patient as the final piece of evidence. The hallway outside Operating Room 7 remained silent as everyone stared at the tablet in Special Agent Marcus Grant's hands. The scheduled email glowed on the screen. Recommendation for immediate termination of Dr. Nia Bennett following failure to respond to emergency surgery. Beneath the subject line sat a detailed report already prepared hours before the operation had even begun. It claimed that Dr. Bennett had abandoned her patient, that she had ignored repeated emergency pages, that her negligence had caused a preventable death. The timestamp stopped everyone cold. Draft created at 8:42 p.m., more than 30 minutes before Nia had even arrived at the hospital. Laura whispered. "He planned all of this." Marcus nodded. He didn't expect Dr. Bennett to disappear. He expected her to fail. Helen Ward slowly closed her eyes. The board nearly believed every word. Nia remained unusually calm. She had spent months preparing herself for the possibility that powerful people would try to erase everything she had built. What she had never imagined was that they would gamble with a patient's life to do it. Marcus turned the tablet toward Laura. There's more. Another folder opened. Hidden beneath the draft email were internal messages exchanged between Richard Vance and Calvin Ross. Disable Bennett's credentials before she arrives. Call local police if she appears. Delay her until Shaw begins the procedure. Once surgery fails, she's finished. Laura felt physically sick. Every decision she had made that night, every command she had followed, every accusation she had thrown at Nia, had been built upon a carefully manufactured lie. She slowly removed her police badge from her uniform. I don't deserve to wear this. Marcus looked at her. That decision belongs to your department. Laura shook her head. No, it belongs to me. She placed the badge into her pocket instead of displaying it on her chest. I'm the one who chose to believe authority without verifying the truth. Across the hallway, investigators escorted Richard Vance from the administrative wing. His wrists were now secured with federal restraints. Unlike the handcuffs placed on Nia, these had been earned through evidence. Vance still refused to surrender. You have emails. You have reports. But you can't prove intent. Marcus stopped walking. We don't need to. He signaled one investigator. A body camera recording appeared on a portable monitor. The footage belonged to Officer Derek Cole. It captured every minute outside the emergency entrance. Richard Vance could clearly be heard saying, I'm afraid she's lying. I don't know this woman. No hospital employee by that name works here. Then came Owen Reed's desperate voice. She's the surgeon. Nobody else can perform this operation. Vance answered without hesitation. The patient needs whoever is available. Marcus paused the recording. The jury will decide whether those words represent intent. Vance's confidence finally disappeared. His shoulders dropped. For the first time all night, he had nothing left to say. Meanwhile, inside the intensive care unit, machines hummed softly around Evelyn Hale's bed. Laura stood quietly beside her mother. The ventilator had been removed. Evelyn's breathing was weak but steady. Several long minutes passed before her eyelids slowly fluttered open. Laura immediately leaned forward. Mum. Evelyn looked toward the familiar voice. Recognition slowly appeared in her tired eyes. Laura? Tears streamed freely down Laura's face. I'm here. I'm so sorry. Evelyn weakly reached for her daughter's hand. You came. Laura broke down completely. I almost lost you. No, Laura whispered. I almost took away the person who saved you. Evelyn's confused eyes shifted toward the doorway where Nia stood quietly with Owen. Evelyn managed a faint smile. You. Nia stepped closer. Don't try to speak. You kept your promise. Nia gently squeezed Evelyn's hand. Years ago, you told me every patient deserves someone willing to fight for them. Laura looked at Nia in surprise. You knew my mother before tonight? Nia smiled softly. She volunteered at the free clinic after retiring from teaching. She used to bring meals for families who couldn't afford cafeteria food. Laura stared at her mother. She had never known. Evelyn had never spoken about those years. Nia continued quietly. When I was still a resident physician, your mother told me something I've never forgotten. She looked at Laura. The easiest way to lose your humanity is to stop seeing the human being standing in front of you. Laura closed her eyes. Every cruel word she had spoken outside the hospital echoed painfully in her mind. A black woman in a blood-stained coat. Anybody can print a fake badge. Hands behind your back. She had seen blood. She had seen wet clothes. She had seen suspicion. She had never truly seen the person. Later that afternoon, Belhaven Police Chief Daniel Mercer arrived at the hospital after reviewing the body camera footage. He approached Nia personally. Dr. Bennett. She turned toward him. On behalf of this department, he removed his service cap. I offer my sincere apology. Nia accepted the gesture with quiet dignity. I appreciate that. Mercer looked at Laura. Sergeant Hale has requested to be placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. Laura nodded. I also requested mandatory retraining for every officer under my command on medical emergency response and identity verification. Nia finally allowed herself the smallest smile. Then perhaps something good can still come from tonight. As evening settled over Belhaven, news helicopters circled above the hospital. Every major network had begun reporting the same headline. Handcuffed surgeon saves the very life she was prevented from reaching. But inside Street Catherine Medical Center, no headline mattered as much as the steady heartbeat echoing from Evelyn Hale's monitor. It was the sound of a life saved, and the first undeniable proof that the truth had finally defeated every lie. 3 weeks later, the Belhaven Federal Courthouse overflowed with reporters, physicians, police officers, and ordinary citizens. The hearing was unlike anything the city had ever witnessed. Every television network carried it live. At the center of the courtroom sat Richard Vance, no longer dressed in expensive executive suits. Instead, he wore a plain gray jail uniform, his wrists restrained by federal cuffs, the same cold steel he had intended for someone else. Special Agent Marcus Grant rose first. For months, he began, the defendant manipulated hospital security systems, falsified administrative records, concealed preventable patient deaths, and deliberately interfered with emergency medical treatment. Large monitors illuminated the courtroom. The jury watched body camera footage showing Dr. Nia Bennett standing in the rain with her hands raised peacefully. "I am the surgeon," she had pleaded. "A woman inside is dying." Then came Richard Vance's voice. "I've never seen this woman before." The courtroom fell silent. Next came the server audit. Richard Vance's administrative account. Credential access revoked. 11 p.m. Then the emergency call. 9 p.m. Then the internal emails. Every lie appeared in perfect chronological order. Finally, Marcus played the recovered draft termination letter Vance had prepared before Nia ever reached the hospital. No explanation remained. No excuse survived. Richard's attorney quietly lowered his head. After only 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Guilty. Guilty of conspiracy. Guilty of obstruction of emergency medical care. Guilty of evidence tampering. Guilty of healthcare fraud. Guilty of making false reports to law enforcement. The judge imposed a lengthy federal prison sentence and ordered full financial restitution to every family harmed by the fraudulent administrative practices. Richard Vance never looked up as officers escorted him from the courtroom. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was respectful. Justice had finally spoken. Outside the courthouse, Police Chief Daniel Mercer addressed dozens of cameras. Today isn't simply about one criminal conviction. He paused. It's about acknowledging that authority without accountability becomes dangerous. He announced sweeping reforms across the Belhaven Police Department. Every officer would now receive mandatory training on emergency medical response, identity verification, implicit bias, and communication during critical incidents. Body camera review standards would become stricter. Medical personnel responding to verified emergencies would receive immediate verification through a direct hospital liaison rather than assumptions made in the field. "We cannot erase what happened," Mercer said, "but we can ensure it never happens again." Standing several feet away, Laura Hale listened quietly. She was no longer wearing the stripes of a supervising sergeant. She had voluntarily accepted a demotion while completing retraining and cooperating with the internal investigation. Many officers expected her to resign. She chose to stay. Not because it was easy, because rebuilding trust never is. 2 months later, sunlight filled the rehabilitation garden behind Street Catherine Medical Center. Flowers bloomed beside newly planted maple trees. Evelyn Hale slowly walked along the stone pathway with the help of a light cane. Her recovery had exceeded every expectation. Although her speech occasionally slowed, her smile remained exactly as Nia remembered from the community clinic. Laura walked beside her mother in comfortable silence. When they reached the garden fountain, Evelyn stopped. Across the courtyard stood Dr. Nia Bennett, speaking with a group of young surgical residents. The residents listened with complete attention. Nia noticed Evelyn first, then Laura. She excused herself and walked over. Evelyn reached for both of their hands. "I've been waiting for this." Laura lowered her eyes. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself." Evelyn gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "Then spend your life becoming someone your future self can forgive." Laura looked toward Nia. "I don't expect forgiveness." Nia smiled softly. "Forgiveness isn't something you ask for once." She looked directly into Laura's eyes. "It's something you earn every day through your choices." Laura nodded. "I've started volunteering at the same community clinic where Mom met you." Nia raised an eyebrow. "I heard. They wouldn't let me hide behind my badge." "They shouldn't." Laura gave the first genuine smile Nia had ever seen from her. "They made me answer phones." Nia laughed quietly. "A good place to start." All three women shared a brief moment of peace. No uniforms, no handcuffs, no courtroom, just people. 6 months later, Street Catherine Medical Center officially opened the Dr. Nia Bennett Center for Emergency Equity and Patient Safety. The program guaranteed that no physician responding to a life-threatening emergency could be denied access without immediate verification through multiple independent channels. The free community clinic Nia loved was fully funded for the next 10 years, using money recovered through the federal fraud case. One wall inside the new center displayed a simple framed photograph. It showed a rain-soaked surgeon walking toward a hospital entrance with handcuffs still hanging from one wrist. Beneath the photograph was a single sentence chosen by Nia herself. Never let assumptions stand between a human being and the help they came to give. Every new employee stopped to read those words on their first day. Many never forgot them. As evening settled over Belhaven, Nia stepped outside the hospital where everything had begun. She looked at the entrance where she had once been humiliated before strangers. This time, the automatic doors opened without hesitation. Doctors, nurses, paramedics, and patients greeted her with warm smiles, not because she was famous, not because she had become a symbol, but because they finally understood what she had always been. A physician whose greatest strength was never her extraordinary skill. It was her refusal to let cruelty change the compassion in her heart. If this story reminded you that dignity should never depend on appearance, race, or first impressions, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to know where you're watching from and what lesson stayed with you the most. And if you believe stories of courage, justice, and hope deserve to be shared, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next journey.